Your reaction when you see the information that we surfaced this morning?
I think my reaction is very similar to the reaction of most people in Wyoming, which is is exactly the problem with Washington, D.C. As you've stated, she has come out, she presented the report, the Republican report. She has called China to be a generational threat, and even more importantly than that, she's actually called for divesting from companies with ties to the Chinese military.
Right.
Yet what do we find out when we dig a little bit deeper and we scratch the surface even just a little tiny bit? We find out that her husband and she are personally and financially benefiting from working for China and Kazakhstan and Belarus and Saudi Arabia and these various things. Her husband has claimed that he has not personally represented China or these other countries, and that's fine, but he is a partner. In other words, he's an owner of that law firm, and as a result, he personally benefits from that representation. He has a choice. He can either work with his firm and take the stand that his wife is apparently advocating publicly and say, we're not going to represent countries that, number one, have problems with human rights abuses, and number two, who are really kind of at a soft war with the United States, or he can go to another law firm. Those are the options. Have some integrity.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And it is, we see this time and time again in Washington. One power couple, one says one thing, the other's doing another thing. And I think that you're exactly right. It's why so many middle Americans are so frustrated with this town and the swamp that it is. You have been really strongly making the case that Liz Cheney's disconnected from Wyoming, and you found an unusual ally this morning. The New York Times has a headline out. I'll just read the headline because it says it all. Where's Liz Cheney, the Wyoming Republicans' exile from Wyoming Republicans? Apparently, she doesn't show up at Wyoming events anymore. What's going on with that?
Well, and she hasn't for quite some time. That's the other thing that people need to understand, that once she was elected in Wyoming, that was kind of, she didn't do a lot more with Wyoming after that. And she came back for the obligatory Lincoln Day dinner or those sorts of things, but then immediately went back to her home in Virginia. And that's the problem with electing someone who comes to your state and acts as though they're a native son or a native daughter, and then as soon as they have the support and vote of confidence of the people, turn around and do exactly what Liz Cheney has done. She's a creature of Washington, D.C., has a long history in Washington, D.C. She's part of the aristocracy of Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia, and Wyoming is suffering the consequence. That article in the New York Times is just stunning in terms of exposing the fact that really that the only thing that she sees about Wyoming is in her rearview mirror.
Yeah, it was a really remarkable story and a lot of detail in it, just explaining the strategy she has, which really is to avoid a lot of the things in Wyoming and try to run a campaign from Washington. There have now been two very big statements in the Republican Party, the Wyoming Republican Party and now the Republican National Committee, both censuring Liz Cheney. Your reaction when you saw the RNC pass that censure resolution over the weekend? I
was in part surprised. I was not really privy to much of what went on with all of that, number one.
Right.
But number two, I think what we're seeing and what I'm extremely proud about is that Wyoming did start this process a year ago on the censure. And what you're seeing is what we've all argued for really decades in the party, and that is that the grassroots ought to have a voice in this party and a voice on policy. And this started in Wyoming with the Wyoming, the counties, and then the state party censoring her. And this has worked its way up where the RNC has censored her. And what they're saying and what they're acknowledging is that the people who she allegedly represents have a voice. They have a voice in the National Party, and that's really important. And I know that there are folks like Mitt Romney and some other guy I didn't recognize, and Lindsey Graham who've come out and they've tutted about the fact that the RNC censored her. And it's like, you know what? We have the right to censure her, and we as the citizens of Wyoming, and we have the right to have the National Party listen to our complaints. We are the Republican Party. We are the ones that turn out the votes. We are the ones that keep our communities running and operating. We have the right to be listened to. And whether Mitt Romney wants to listen to us or not isn't the question. The RNC needed to, and they did. And I'm awfully proud of them for that.
Yeah, you see this fissure growing between some of the old guard Republicans, which I put Liz Cheney in the old guard, the the decade or 2 decades before her. Mitch McConnell's in that group, and the new generation of leaders who have a certain thing. And I think one of the amazing things to watch is that some people are misinterpreting what some of this censure is. I think there's, well, you can't investigate Donald Trump if you're a Republican. That's really not what this is about. Liz Cheney is actually participating in a process that Republicans have not been allowed to participate in fully, and it's not actually by the rules of Congress. They're actually breaking the rules of Congress the way January 6th is. Isn't that really the heart of this, which is this isn't a really constituted committee?
That's absolutely right. It's illegitimate, but I'm going to take it a step further.
Please.
Congress makes the law. They don't act as a judiciary.
Yeah.
What this committee is doing, and when Liz Cheney wants to talk about the Constitution, I kind of look at her with a little bit of skepticism in my eyes. And the reason that I do is this. They pass the laws. It's our judiciary that actually prosecutes. So what this committee is doing, I've been thinking a lot about it and trying to figure out how to frame this. They are acting as the prosecutors. In other words, they're taking the depositions, they're reviewing the documents, they're issuing the subpoenas, they're dragging people before them. And then when someone says, look, I've got a privilege, I'm not going to tell you this or I'm not going to tell you that, they're ruling on those requests like a judge would. They're saying, yeah, no, we're not going to buy that one. We're going to overrule that objection. And then they're turning around, and what are they going to be when they issue their report? They're going to be the jury. So you want to talk about an illegal and unconstitutional body from top to bottom. They're acting as prosecutor, judge, jury, and henchman on this January 6th thing. So if this were a properly constituted committee, it would investigate, but they're actually going much further beyond that. For one of the first times, I think it may be the first time in U.S. history, we have a group of legislators with all of the power of Congress actually acting as prosecutors, judges, and juries, and they're persecuting people. And that's what's wrong with this committee. There is a judiciary in Washington, D.C. They're prosecuting the people who trespass or destroyed property. They're being prosecuted under our Constitution. That is not the role of Congress, and it sure as heck isn't a role of a committee, of Nancy Pelosi's little pet committee. That's not their role, and if they can't even comply with their own congressional rules, they're illegitimate from top to bottom, but I think it's much more insidious and much more dangerous than that. I think it's absolutely unconstitutional as a violation of the separation of powers, and every person in this country ought to be scared that these kind of committees are going to become the norm, and we all need to worry about that.
Yeah, our whole system has always been built on the idea of an adversarial system so that everybody can be advocated and then there can be fairness at the end of the process. And the Democrats have just taken the adversarial defense part out of it. You can't have a defense. It started with impeachments where the president's lawyers couldn't attend the depositions and do things, and it's become a one-sided kangaroo court. And I think that's the part that Americans are missing. We got to get them educated on it. Now, you had a big moment, Harriet, in the last few weeks. You won the straw poll, and you didn't win it like by a little bit. You won it big in Wyoming. A huge win, a lot of momentum. Tell us what it was like to see your state party, your voters say, we prefer Harriet Hageman over Liz Cheney.
Well, it obviously was exciting, and I'll use the word that I used earlier, which is I am very honored that people are placing their trust and their faith in me, and they're doing that because I'm one of them. Yeah. You know, I'm the same as everybody else that's sitting in that room when I'm there with the state party, or I'm at a county party event, or I'm at the breakfast place this morning. I'm just one of them. I'm just a regular old Wyomingite. I kind of refer to myself as a blue-collar attorney because I represent those people who put food on your table, gas in your car, and a roof over your head. We won 59-6. The straw poll was 59 in favor of Harriet Hageman, 6 for Liz Cheney, and 1, I think 2 for one other person and 1 for another person after that.
Right.
So it was a strong vote of confidence in terms of our campaign and where we're going.
Yeah, it's a pretty remarkable moment, and all eyes are on this race. As you step back, one of the things that has become more and more clear is that the Biden administration's policy for America is really anti-energy, at least anti-traditional energy, anti-resource driven. And of course, we have these rich resources in the United States. How is, we're now a year in, 13 months into the Biden experiment, how has the energy policies of the Biden administration, the natural resources policy of the Biden administration negatively impact Wyoming?
Well, that negatively impacts us the same way it does everywhere else, and that's the rising cost. All of this inflation is monetary policy, and they have a monetary policy of inflation.